You can't say this isn't some of the greatest artwork you've ever seen. What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a video discussing how I feel that Konami should have handled the release of the Link mechanic. Now that we're in the Link era, Code of the Duelist has been released. We already have our first few introductory Link archetypes. We have Trickstars, we have the World Chalice, we've got all these different things going on here, but ultimately I don't feel that Konami handled it in the correct way, and let me explain what I mean. So when you're looking at the Link mechanic in general, I did a whole video on what I feel is the inherent problem with the Link mechanic itself, and basically the short version of that video is, I feel the inherent problem with the Link mechanic is that it's very restricting in how it allows you to utilize other summoning mechanics available in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And just things like synchro summoning, Xyz summoning. There's been no other mechanic like this that really hinders your ability to utilize the extra decks for a variety of different archetypes. And because of the fact that the Link mechanic functions in this way, I feel like Konami should have gone about releasing the Link monsters in a different fashion. Now, the one Link monster I'm very happy that we did get is Mrs. Radiant. And Mrs. Radiant is essentially the generic Earth Link monster, if you want to call it that, because essentially it just requires 2 Earth monsters being a Link 2, it pumps up all your Link monsters' attack values, and if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add an Earth monster back to your hand. So really it's all upside. It does require 2 materials to make it, so you are taking a bit of a minus, but you're recouping that minus and going even if Mrs. Radiant is sent to the graveyard. So in the long-term card economy, you're not really losing anything, and the fact that it opens up 2 more extra monster zones for you to utilize and special summon things from your extra deck is huge, and that's why you see it's so popular in a deck like Zodiac. Now, I know that it just so happens that Zodiac is the dominant archetype at the time of Link's release, and it just so happens that Zodiac happens to be of the Earth attribute as well, so it's a natural fit that Mrs. Radiant is going to boon this, just act as a boon for this archetype and really boost it, much further over the top than it already needed to be. But I want to talk about what Konami really should have done here. So we got Mrs. Radiant in Code of the Duelist, that's fantastic. But what I'm really questioning is why didn't we get all 6 of the attributal Link monsters, if you want to call them that? Because I feel like if we received all 6 of these from the beginning, people wouldn't feel so restricted in their deck building mechanics and their ability to play certain decks or certain archetypes, because if we had all the different attributal Link monsters out at once, people could decide, oh, if I want to play a deck that just happens to revolve around a certain attribute, I already have this Link monster out at my disposal that doesn't hinder me from being able to play this certain deck. Now let me go ahead and elaborate on that. So in Circuit Breaker, we're going to be getting Mass Starboy, which is the generic water Link monster. It does the exact same thing as Mrs. Radiant, except for water monsters. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, you look at the number of water-based archetypes that we have, and this actually matters significantly. Let's start with Mermail. Now, to be fair, Mermail is a deck that does not necessarily require the extra deck to be able to function well. The deck can OTK and is powerful enough on its own without utilizing the extra deck that you could make the argument that a card like this isn't necessary. However, it does allow the deck to have some more flexibility and some more breathing room in the plays that the deck does want to utilize. For example, something like Bahamut Shark Totally Awesome would be much more achievable if a card like this existed, and I think that's something that some Mermail players definitely miss, especially, now that Norden's gone and all these different things like that. But That's just one aspect. Then you look at a deck like Paleozoic. Now, Paleozoic, because they're immune to monster effects, won't get the attack boost from Mistar Boy, but you could also just have the fact that you can make multiple Totally Awesomes with your Paleozoic monster, since Paleozoics can be used as link material, or just make multiple rank 2s in general. You know, Cat Shark Digesto Phoenix combo, different things like that, by just enabling and having this generic water link 2 monster to open up more extra monster zones. You're enabling the deck to have so many more options than it previously had before for a relatively low cost. And I've been talking about Totally Awesome. Well, if you're playing just a frog deck in general, since the frogs are very capable of spamming monsters on the board in a relatively easy manner, having a card like this, again, gives those decks that are playing frogs or, you know, just centered around these types of monsters a lot more breathing room in what they're capable of doing, and gives them just a lot more life and a lot more, I would say, a lot more of a chance ultimately in being able to compete in the current metagame. But I don't want to stop there, because if we already have Mrs. Radiant and we're going to be getting Mastar Boy, then we're obviously going to be getting the other 4 of these as well. And I wanted to discuss the decks that these could potentially help. You know, if you're looking at the wind attribute one, I believe the card it's going to be based on is called Blade Fly, so it's going to be like Broad Fly or something, I don't fucking know. Then that could help decks like Magispectors. Magispectors, you know, have a pendulum mechanic centered around them, but because of the way that the pendulum summoning now works under the new link rules, you can't pendulum summon from the extra deck for more than 1. So being able to go into something like Broad Fly to open up 2 zones for you to pendulum from would be pretty cool. And because if you use a pendulum monster as link material, the monsters go to the extra deck, very similar to if you used a pendulum monster as a synchro material. So that means you're not really losing any advantage in a pendulum deck, because you can just summon the Broad Fly and then re-special summon out the Magispectors that you just used as link material. A couple other decks this could help as well. Wind Witches is a pretty big one, and I guess by extension you could throw in Invoked, because Wind Witch Invoked is a pretty popular, you know, synergistic archetype. So by having the Broad Fly in this deck, you are much more able to achieve something like Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon plus a Raijin or anything else like that, because you have so many wind monsters at your disposal in the Wind Witch archetype itself that you just have the ability to do some of the older combos that the decks were previously and notoriously known for. Now moving on to Fire. Fire, I believe, is Little Chimera, so it's going to be Massive fucking Chimera, I don't know. But Fire is kind of an interesting attribute because there aren't really many high-tier archetypes that are Fire. Metal Foes is the most popular one in recent time that utilizes the extra deck, because Infernoids is one as well, but Infernoids never use the extra deck, so I guess that's a little bit irrelevant. Arguably they could, because they could use the extra deck to clear out some space for levels, and if they make something like Massive Chimera, then they have some more room to work with, so I guess you could argue Infernoids as well, and then they can just special summon themselves back out. But Metal Foe is very similar to Magispectors with the Wind generic Link monster. Very same idea. You can special summon out, you know, a ton of Metal Foes on one turn, then on your next turn you link up into Massive Chimera, pendulum summon them back, and then you just have a very strong board, and plus that attack boost from the Chimera could actually make a very big difference in Metal Foes' ability to actually just go in and OTK your opponent. Now the two big attributes I want to get into are Light and Dark. So Light, I believe the monster would be based on Hoshinigan. I don't remember if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the other star-looking guy. So Hoshinigan would be able to provide so much extra support to these really cool light-based decks. Most notably, Light Sworn, I think, would be the biggest one, because that deck can just shit out light monsters like no tomorrow. If you're milling wolves, or if you've got just anything that deck is capable of summoning, like you've got Trick Clown, you've got so many different things that you can just easily special summon onto the board for free. You can link up, and then you have 2 extra monster zones available, and then now you can make these crazy boards that you weren't previously able to do. Now, I know Light Sworn can still do stuff like double Psyframe Lord Omega, because Omega can can bounce himself out of the extra monster zone, but I don't want to be reliant on Omega to be able to make my crazy boards, and having that generic light monster would allow me to do that. Then you've got stuff like ABC. ABC is another light-based deck that could take advantage of this, so then you can have stuff like Dragon Buster plus a rank 4 if your board is essentially set up for it. Or you can even take like Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes is another deck that doesn't necessarily require the extra deck, but if you had the ability to open up some zones, let's say you played a Soul Charge, you can just link 2 of your stones together into a generic light link 2. Now you have 2 zones open, so you can end on something like Spirit Dragon plus like a rank 8, like a number 38, or something crazy like that. And then you move on to the Dark Monster, Witch's Apprentice, so it's going to be like Witch's Master or something like that. This is probably the biggest one because you've got decks that this can support like Pendulum Magicians for all of the reasons I've mentioned for all the other Pendulum decks. You've got Phantom Knights to an extent because while Phantom Knights are pretty much used in tandem with Burning Abyss, having them being able to link up and their ability to just recur more advantage when they hit the graveyard is really big and can allow for some really big boasted plays. But the most significant archetype that this monster would help is DDD. DDD is arguably one of the decks that got crippled the worst by the new Link summoning mechanic because this deck was so extra deck centric, and sure, you have stuff like Genghis to resurrect some of your monsters, so that kind of gets around the mechanic itself, but being able to spam out as many monsters as DDD is able to do, you can link a couple of them up into the generic Dark Link 2, and then you can end on some of your crazy powerful boards like Siegfried 38 or just anything that that deck was capable of doing. I really feel like Konami missed an opportunity here to really go in and just release all 6 of these monsters at once to give players the freedom to choose which decks they really wanted to play, or at least give them a fucking chance at the very least, because with that said, I think it's just something that rather than being forced and conformed into the game that they want us to play, by releasing all 6 of these monsters, this breaks that mold and allows players a lot more creative flexibility in their deck building as well as their deck options. But guys, that's just my opinion on the subject. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the generic Link 2 monsters, and if we should have gotten them all at the same time, or if you think the fact they're releasing them one set at a time is a really good idea. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.